My stepmother told my father I had failed the exam that made me a doctor. She told him I had been asked to leave my program, that I was ashamed to come home, and that I wanted no contact with the family. 8 years later, I stood outside room 627 at Lakeshore University Medical Center wearing a badge that read, Dr. Ethan Rourke, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Vivian Hale was inside, recovering from an aortic valve replacement. The tape securing her forehead started to curl upward. I noticed that before anything else. That is what training does. It turns fear into details you can name. Postoperative day 3. Stable. Mild atrial fibrillation. Discharge likely by afternoon. I had read the chart 4 times. I did not need to be there. I had disclosed the family connection, removed myself from every treatment decision, and signed paperwork to ensure her care would never depend on how I felt about her. Still, I came. A visitor log in my coat pocket showed my father had entered the hospital 13 times in 5 days. He was behind that door. Thomas Hale had no idea I had become a surgeon. No idea I was married. No idea he had an 8-year-old grandson. I closed my hand around my badge. Then I heard a man turn a page inside. My father was reading to the woman who had convinced him I had disappeared. And I was about to walk in. My life was nothing like the one Vivian had described to my father. I was 42, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Lakeshore, and usually awake before the city had decided whether it was morning. My office overlooked a parking garage instead of the lake people imagined came with the title. The coffee machine leaked. My desk drawers never closed properly. And taped beside my monitor was a drawing my son had made in 2nd grade. It showed me standing beside a red heart almost as tall as I was. Dad fixes the parts people can't see. Owen was 8, missing one front tooth, and obsessed with building model bridges across the living room floor. He could explain load distribution better than most adults and still forgot where he left his shoes every morning. My wife, Naomi, was a structural engineer. We had been married for 10 years after meeting at a hospital fundraiser where she spent 20 minutes correcting the architect's description of a suspension bridge. I loved her before dessert. She knew about my father. Not every detail at first, just that we had not spoken in years, and that there were certain holidays when I became quieter without meaning to. Naomi never pushed me toward reconciliation. She only asked once whether silence was protecting me or preserving someone else's lie. I did not answer. Our home was small, loud, and ordinary. Owen left cereal bowls in the sink. Naomi sent me photographs of dinner when surgeries ran late. Our old dog, Murphy, slept beneath the dining table and growled at the vacuum cleaner as if it had personally insulted him. Thomas Hale knew none of it. As far as my father understood, I had failed my licensing exam, left medicine, changed my number, and disappeared because I could not face the family. He did not know I had changed my last name to Rourke, my mother's name. He did not know I had finished residency in Minneapolis, completed fellowship, married Naomi, or stood beside Owen the day he was born. He did not know his grandson had his eyes. For 8 years, I built a life sturdy enough to survive being unseen. Standing outside room 627, I realized that life was about to collide with the story my father had believed instead. A cerebral aneurysm ruptured while she was standing in the kitchen rinsing a coffee cup. One minute she was telling me to hurry, or I would miss the bus. The next, the cup shattered on the floor, and she was gone before the ambulance reached our street. My father moved through the next year like a man walking underwater. Thomas Hale kept going to work because 12 employees depended on him. But at home he forgot groceries, left lights burning, and sometimes stood in the hallway as if he had entered the wrong house. Vivian appeared 16 months later. She was polished, quick, and warm in a way our house had not been since my mother died. She remembered birthdays, brought homemade soup, and laughed loudly enough to fill the silence my father and I had stopped knowing how to cross. She found my mother's recipe card for beef stew and taught herself to make it. She attended my school concert, even though I played badly. At their wedding, she fixed my tie and told me she was not trying to replace anyone. "I just want to be someone you can count on," she said. For almost a year, I believed her. The first changes were too small to call changes. Vivian began answering the house phone before anyone else could reach it. "Good hearing," she would say when I joked about it. Then she started taking messages. "Your aunt called. Nothing urgent. Your coach rescheduled. Your father's busy. I'll tell him you stopped by the shop." Sometimes the messages reached us. Sometimes they did not. There was never enough proof to accuse her, only the sense that every conversation in our family had begun passing through one person. The mail changed next. My Aunt Margaret sent birthday cards with $20 folded inside. By the time I was 16, the envelopes arrived opened and resealed with clear tape. Vivian said the glue had come loose. When the money stopped appearing, she said Margaret had probably decided I was too old for cash in a card. I asked my father once. He glanced at the envelope, then at Vivian. "She handles the mail, Ethan. Don't turn everything into a problem." That sentence stayed with me longer than the missing money. Vivian never needed to prove I was wrong. She only needed to make noticing feel rude. My mother's things disappeared gradually. A scarf from the coat closet. A silver bracelet from the dresser. The wooden jewelry box my grandfather had made for her. When I asked, Vivian smiled and said she had moved everything somewhere safer. "Those pieces matter," she told me. "I'm protecting them for you." She never said where. By then, I had learned that asking twice made my father tired, and making my father tired had become another form of disloyalty. The incident that pushed me toward medicine happened during my sophomore year. I was playing hockey and got checked into the boards hard enough to break my collarbone. The pain was bright and nauseating. I knew something was wrong before I looked down and saw the shape beneath my jersey. Vivian drove me to the emergency department. In front of the triage nurse, she was perfect. She held my good hand, told everyone I was brave, and repeated that my father was on his way. The moment we were alone behind the curtain, her voice changed. "Your father has a major client dinner," she said, checking her watch. "Let's not turn this into a crisis unless it actually is one." My shoulder looks wrong. "You're upset. That makes everything look worse." I was 15, frightened, and already trained to question whether my pain was inconvenient enough to count. The resident who examined me was exhausted. His scrub top was wrinkled, and there was dried coffee on one sleeve. But he pulled up a stool, showed me the X-ray, and explained where the clavicle had fractured. Then he asked, "How bad does it hurt?" Vivian answered for me. "He's doing fine." The resident looked past her. I asked him. No adult had done that in a long time. I told him the truth. He listened without interrupting, adjusted my medication, explained what the sling would feel like, and said being scared did not mean I was weak. I do not remember his name. I remember deciding I wanted to become the person who asked the question and waited for the real answer. Vivian told my father I had suffered a minor sports injury. By the time he came home, she had reduced a fracture, an emergency visit, and 6 weeks in a sling to something that did not require concern. The pattern followed me into adulthood. At graduation, when my acceptance to an accelerated medical program was announced, Vivian clapped harder than anyone. Later, she told relatives I was trying pre-med. Trying. As if I had not earned admission into a program accepting fewer than 5% of applicants. At Thanksgiving during my second year, She told my father's business partner I was still figuring out whether medicine suited me. I had a 3.9 GPA. I corrected her gently. She laughed and squeezed my wrist. Ethan hates bragging about himself. The table laughed with her, and the truth disappeared beneath the joke. Whenever I achieved something, Vivian translated it into something smaller. A scholarship became financial aid. Research became helping a professor. Clinical rotations became shadowing. Exhaustion became poor time management. If I objected, she said I was sensitive. If I stayed quiet, her version became the family record. The most effective part was that she always sounded concerned. He puts so much pressure on himself. He has trouble connecting. I worry medicine is becoming his whole identity. Each sentence looked like care from a distance. Up close, it was erosion. One summer, I heard her speaking to her sister in the den. Ethan is intelligent, she said, but he's fragile. Thomas expects too much from him. I stood in the hallway holding a glass of water. Fragile. The word followed me for years. I told myself she was protecting me. I told myself concern and contempt could sound alike. I told myself my father loved me and would see through anything that truly mattered. What I did not understand was that Vivian was not simply diminishing me. She was training both of us. She trained me to believe that asking for my father made me demanding. She trained him to believe that every disappointment in my life proved I could not handle pressure. By the time she told the lie that separated us, she had spent years building a family in which her version always arrived first. And both of us had learned to accept it. I took my licensing exam in July, 3 weeks after graduation. The testing center smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I walked out exhausted, but certain I had done well. When the score arrived, I stared at the screen until the number blurred. Top 2% nationally. I called my father from the parking lot before I even started the car. Vivian answered. He's with a customer, she said. Tell him I passed. Tell him I ranked in the top 2%. Her voice softened. Of course, he'll be proud. He never called. 2 days later, I tried the number at Hale Heating and Ventilation. Vivian answered there too. He knows, she said. Then why hasn't he called? A pause. Ethan, he's embarrassed. He thinks you have been pulling away for years. Give him time. I remember gripping the phone hard enough to hurt. I passed. I know, honey. She said it the way people speak to someone who is confused. What I did not know was that my father had received a different story. Vivian told him I had failed the exam, been removed from the program, and changed my number because I could not face the family. She showed him a printed email that appeared to come from me. I need space. Do not contact me until I am ready. I had never written it. He believed her because she cried while reading it. I believed her because she had spent years speaking for him. That was how she separated us. Not with one lie, but with two versions placed carefully between two people who already feared being unwanted. I waited for my father to call. He waited for me to come home. Vivian stood in the middle and told each of us the other had chosen silence. For 8 years, neither of us understood that the silence hurting us had never really belonged to either of us at all. Residency gave me somewhere to put the anger. The hours were brutal, but they were honest. A patient crashed or stabilized. A lab improved or it didn't. Nobody could shrink a result with a careful tone and call it concern. I borrowed $198,000 to finish training. There was no family contribution, no check from my father's business, no emergency number I trusted enough to call. I paid interest while sleeping in call rooms and checking my account balance before buying groceries. I went from general surgery into cardiothoracic training in Minneapolis, 5 hours from Waukesha, and far enough that I stopped expecting to see anyone from my old life in a hospital corridor. Dr. Samuel Ortega noticed before anyone else that I volunteered for every holiday. He never asked why. He just left the trauma lounge key on my desk one Christmas Eve and said, "You don't work like a man chasing success. You work like a man making sure nobody can send you home." I laughed because the alternative was answering him. He taught me how to speak to families after bad outcomes, how to admit uncertainty without surrendering authority, and how to stay in a room after delivering news that made people hate you for being the messenger. He also wrote the recommendation that got me into fellowship. During my second year, I legally changed my last name from Hale to Rourke, my mother's name. I told people it was professional preference. The truth was simpler. I wanted one part of my identity to belong to someone who had never chosen to leave me. I became an attending at 34, chief at 40. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking old numbers and stopped wondering whether my father had called. Work did not replace family. It replaced waiting. And for a while, that felt close enough to keep breathing. During my second year of fellowship, I drove back to Waukesha without telling anyone. It was January, cold enough that the highway looked colorless. I had finished rounds at 6, changed in the locker room, and spent 5 hours convincing myself I was not making a mistake. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The crooked mailbox was still there. So was the crack in the driveway my father had promised to repair every summer. I parked across the street until the windshield fogged. Then I crossed over and knocked. Vivian opened the door wearing an apron dusted with flour. Warm air carried the smell of cinnamon into the cold. For 1 second, something moved across her face. Not surprise. Calculation. Then she smiled. "Ethan, you should have called. I need to see Dad. He's at the warehouse." "On a Saturday?" Emergency furnace delivery. Winter is always chaos. She rested one hand against the doorframe. It did not look like she was blocking me. That was what made it effective. Behind her, I heard the familiar voice of the baseball announcer my father had listened to for years. Then the sound stopped. I looked past her. "Is someone inside?" "The radio," she said. "I leave it on when I bake." I could have stepped forward. I could have driven 6 minutes to Hale Heating and checked whether my father's truck was there. Instead, I apologized for arriving unannounced. Vivian touched my arm. "He still needs time, honey." I drove back to Minneapolis that night. Years later, Thomas told me he had been in the living room the entire time. Vivian had said the man at the door was a delivery driver at the wrong house. She did not force me to leave. She had trained me to do it for her. My Aunt Margaret never fully accepted the story. She was my mother's older sister, a retired librarian living in Iowa, and she had disliked Vivian from the beginning with the certainty of someone who recognized control before she could prove it. Margaret kept finding me. She mailed birthday cards to medical school, then residency, then the hospital in Minneapolis after I changed addresses. Her handwriting was small and slanted, and every envelope carried the same sentence beneath my name. "Still here." She never pushed too hard. That was why I kept reading. One year, she wrote, "Your father asks about you more than Vivian admits." I called her after I became an attending. "Has he tried to reach me?" I asked. Margaret was silent long enough that I heard the clock in her kitchen. "Vivian handles his phone, his mail, most of his email," she said. "She says it's easier for his blood pressure." That doesn't answer me. No, she said carefully. I don't know what he tried. I only know he still says your name. I wanted to ask more. I wanted an address, a date, proof that my father had not simply accepted my absence and moved on. But wanting proof meant risking the possibility that none existed. So I thanked her and ended the call. For years, Margaret left a door open between us. I was the one too afraid to walk through it. 3 weeks before I opened room 627, I was reviewing the Cardiothoracic Quality Board before morning rounds. The list was routine: overnight complications, delayed discharges, rhythm alerts, unexpected returns to the ICU. Then I saw her name. Vivian Hale, 64. Postoperative day 2 after an aortic valve replacement. New atrial fibrillation. Stable, but flagged for review. I read the line twice. For 8 years, Vivian had existed only in old memories and unanswered questions. Now her name was inside my hospital, attached to a room number, a chart, and a pulse I could measure. I knew the policy before I finished reading the line. Family connection. Immediate disclosure. No direct treatment if another qualified physician was available. No exceptions because the history was complicated, especially not then. I called Dr. Miriam Shah, chair of the hospital ethics committee. She answered from rounds. Tell me exactly what the relationship is, she said. Stepmother. Current relationship? None. 8 years. Any reason your judgment could be questioned? I looked at Vivian's name on the screen. Yes. Miriam did not ask me to make it sound cleaner. Within an hour, I was in a conference room with her and Caroline Webb from Hospital Counsel. Caroline opened a formal conflict of interest file and asked questions in a voice so neutral it forced me to be precise. Had I ever treated Vivian before? No. Had I participated in her surgery? No. Did I stand to gain from her recovery or death? No. Was there a history that could create anger, resentment, or a motive others might later question? Yes, I said. The word sat there longer than I expected. Caroline slid a disclosure form toward me. This is not an accusation, she said. It protects the patient, the hospital, and you. I read every page. I agreed not to enter orders, change medication, influence discharge timing, or participate in clinical decisions. Dr. Priya Nandakumar, who had performed the valve replacement, would remain the surgeon of record. Dr. Benjamin Roth would manage the arrhythmia. Any administrative review involving Vivian would go through Miriam. If anything changes emotionally, Miriam said, you tell me before it changes professionally. I will. Can you do that? I thought about the years Vivian had spent deciding what I was allowed to hear, what my father was allowed to believe, and which version of me entered every room before I did. Then I looked at the form. Yes. It cost me something to say it. It was also true. I signed 5 pages and initialed 3 more. Caroline documented that I had voluntarily removed myself from the case before any direct contact with the patient. For once, I wanted every important fact about this family recorded somewhere official. Not whispered through a doorway. Not softened over dinner. Not carried by the one person who benefited from controlling the message. When the meeting ended, Miriam kept the file. You are still allowed to be a person, she said. You just cannot be her physician. I nodded. That distinction mattered. Whatever Vivian had done, her pulse, pain, and recovery did not belong to my anger. I would not let her turn me into the man she had spent years describing. and I would not let anyone say her care had suffered because the son she erased finally saw her name on that board again. Dr. Priya Nandakumar briefed me that morning. She had performed Vivian's valve replacement and spoke about the case as she would any other. Repair looks clean, she said. Hemodynamics are stable. The atrial fibrillation is mild and responding to medication. If the rhythm holds, she can probably discharge tomorrow. Dr. Benjamin Roth from cardiology gave me the answer in more technical language. Potassium is corrected. Rate is controlled. No cardioversion unless she changes. I thanked them both and kept my questions clinical. That was the rule I had chosen. I could know whether Vivian was safe. I could not decide what happened next. Angela Ruiz, the charge nurse, caught me near the elevators. Room 627 is doing well, she said. Her husband has been there every hour we allow visitors. I kept my face still. Thomas Hale. Angela checked the chart. Yes, sweet man. Brings the same paperback every day and reads to her when she can't sleep. For a moment, I could see him as he had been before Vivian became the voice between us. My father reading the newspaper aloud at breakfast. My father explaining how a furnace worked by drawing arrows on a napkin. My father staying beside my mother's hospital bed until the nurses made him leave. He had always known how to stay. That was what hurt. He had stayed beside Vivian through surgery, 13 visits in 5 days, while believing his only son had chosen to disappear. I thanked Angela and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. For 8 years, my father had existed as an absence. Now he was 6 floors below me, reading to the woman who had built that absence on purpose. That afternoon, I opened a cloud folder. The file was there. Licensing examination results. Top 2% nationally. I had known the number for 8 years. I could have recited it from memory. Still, I opened the report and read each line as if someone might have changed it while I was not looking. Vivian's version had lived so long in my father's mind that part of me needed proof my memory had not become another story. Then Caroline sent me the packet connected to the conflict review. Inside was the visitor record for room 627. Thomas Hale. 13 entries in 5 days. Morning, afternoon, evening. My father had signed his name again and again beside the woman who told him I had abandoned him. I printed both documents. The score report went into one pocket of my coat. The visitor log went into the other. I did not plan to show them to anyone. I only needed the paper near me. For most of my life, Vivian had controlled what was spoken. Before entering that room, I needed something she could not reinterpret. I stood outside room 627 longer than I will ever openly admit. The hallway was quiet in the way hospitals are never truly quiet. A monitor chimed 2 doors down. A cart with a badge clicked across the floor. Somewhere nearby, coffee burned in a pot no one had remembered to turn off. My badge had gone warm in my hand. I kept turning it over, thumb tracing the edge of my name. Dr. Ethan Rourke. Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Inside that room was the man I had spent 8 years learning not to need. My hands had been steady inside an open chest that morning. Now they would not stop opening and closing at my sides. I told myself I did not have to go in. Vivian's care was assigned. Priya and Benjamin would finish the discharge. Miriam had documented the conflict. I could return to my office, say nothing, and let the past remain sealed behind one more door. I thought about Naomi, who had never demanded that I forgive anyone. I thought about Owen's drawing beside my monitor. Dad fixes the parts people can't see. I could not fix this. The fear was not Vivian. It was my father looking at me and confirming that the silence had become easier than finding me. For 1 second, I nearly walked away. Then I felt the score report in one pocket and the visitor log in the other. 2 pieces of paper. 2 facts no one could soften. I put my hand on the handle. This time, I would not let Vivian decide who was allowed through the door. I opened it. Vivian was asleep when I entered. My father sat beside the window with a paperback across his knee. His hair was gray. He wore reading glasses low on his nose, and the same brown watch I remembered from childhood. The door clicked shut behind me. Thomas looked up. "Can I help you?" The question was polite, automatic, the way people speak to a doctor they have never met. For 1 full second, my father did not recognize me. I had imagined anger, tears, silence. I had never imagined being mistaken for a stranger. "I'm Dr. Rourke," I said, using the measured tone I kept for difficult conversations. "I oversee cardiothoracic surgery." He nodded, then glanced at my badge. His eyes stopped on the first name. Ethan. Something shifted in his face. Not recognition all at once, more like disbelief breaking apart slowly enough for hope to enter. He stood, the book sliding to the floor. "You're—" His voice failed. Then he looked at me again, searching the face of a 42-year-old man for the son he remembered at 34. "Ethan." I had spent 8 years imagining how he would say my name. I never expected it to sound like a question he was afraid to answer. Vivian woke when my father said my name. Her eyes moved from Thomas to me, then settled on the badge clipped to my coat. Dr. Ethan Rourke, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. The color left her face. For 8 years, Vivian had controlled every version of this story. In room 627, with my father 3 feet away, she had nowhere to send the truth before it reached him. "You told him I failed," I said. My voice sounded clinical. It was the only voice I trusted. "You told him I was removed from the program and disappeared because I was ashamed. I passed, top 2% nationally." Thomas looked at her. "What is he talking about?" Vivian pushed herself higher against the pillows. "Thomas, this is not the time." "I called twice," I continued. "Once at home, once at the business." She answered both times. "She told me you were embarrassed and needed space." My father stared at me as if the room had shifted. "She showed me an email," he said. "It said you didn't want us to contact you." I never wrote it. The paperback remained on the floor. Vivian's mouth opened, but no explanation came. Thomas turned toward her. "Did you make it?" "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" He was pulling away. He changed his name. He left. "I changed my name years later," I said, "after I stopped believing anyone was coming." Thomas closed his eyes. The anger I had imagined never arrived. What replaced it was worse, recognition. He understood that both of us had waited for the other to move first while Vivian stood between us and called the silence proof. "You're married?" he asked. "Yes." "What's her name?" "Naomi." He swallowed. "And you have a son?" "Owen. He's 8. My father gripped the chair. "I have a grandson." "You do?" The words hurt more than I expected. I looked at Vivian. "You didn't only lie about an exam. You made each of us believe the other had chosen not to come back." She began to cry. I picked up the discharge packet. "I am not your treating surgeon," I told her. Dr. Nundukumar and Dr. Roth approved the plan. Your rhythm is controlled. If your afternoon labs remain stable, their team expects discharge tomorrow. Cardiology follow-up is in 2 weeks. Thomas looked stunned by the return to medicine. But her care had never belonged to this argument. I have formally withdrawn from every treatment decision, I said. Another physician will complete the process. Vivian whispered, Ethan, please. I stepped toward the door. No, you had 8 years to tell the truth before I had to say it beside your hospital bed. Then I left before either of them could ask me to carry what came next. Thomas caught up with me near the elevators. Ethan, wait. I stopped, but I did not turn around. She lied to both of us, he said. I should have checked. I should have driven to you, called the school, asked Margaret, anything. I faced him. She built the wall, I said, but you lived behind it for 8 years without checking what was on the other side. His eyes filled. Can I fix this? I don't know. My office is on 9, I said. You know where to find me. Then I stepped inside. On the 4th floor, a 19-year-old was waking after heart surgery with nobody waiting yet. I went to him. CTA plus disclaimer. Could you forgive a parent who believed someone else's story for 8 years without checking? Share your verdict below and subscribe to Quiet Verdicts for more emotional family drama stories. This story was created by the Quiet Verdicts team for entertainment only. Do not imitate any actions described.